Okay. Welcome everybody. Welcome to another Bell AFPEC session. Bonsoir tout le monde. Welcome. It is Sunday at 2:11 p.m. and I thank you for joining us again. Today we have a very, very special topic that I think is much needed actually right now and around the world, especially as we had so many changes over the past year in the world and how people are dealing with changes within their lives, within their families, within their business. Anything that's impacting the way we actually think and the way we feel and how we carry ourselves. I think this topic today is much needed as things have been heightened in the good and in the bad way as we moved into digital space and actually being a bit more sheltered in this world, and everything has been impacted as far as the economy and how we actually socially live and thrive with each other. My name is Ronald Setout. Of course, for everybody who don't know me, I am the director of the Bell Initiative program, and it is an entrepreneurial program that focuses on providing entrepreneurship education and connecting entrepreneurs in Haiti to resources. We're based here in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a program that falls under the Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce. And I also want to acknowledge AFPEC, which is it was a business school, an entrepreneurship school actually located in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. We have partnered with them to provide more access to information, education to entrepreneurs in Haiti as well, and to the diaspora and people in general, so we can really continue helping people uplift themselves and providing more opportunities. So welcome to another Bell AFPEC session, I should say. Welcome to everybody in Haiti, Pumuni on IIT, and welcome to everybody here in the States and wherever you are watching from. Today we have a special topic, like I mentioned, with a very special guest. Her name is Jordache Michelle. She is a licensed mental health therapist based in Miami, Florida. Jordache is a Haitian American and I'm going to be very transparent right now. And the fellows, I'm sorry for not telling you all this, but Jordache is actually my cousin. So we are family. We had some discussions a couple of weeks ago about different things, and mental health came up because that's what she does. I just got curious as to how does mental health affect entrepreneurs? And so today's topic is mental entrepreneurship and mental health. And those are tied in. We started talking. I didn't realize, and I should have, it's one of those things you don't actually think about, but it's one of those things that and I'm not going to go through too deep with what you're going to present, but when Jordache starts going through some of the slides, and you'll realize you'll be able to tie in some of the things that you might go through as an entrepreneur, but even as a person, not necessarily just an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurs do have sometimes unique situations that they're put in and stresses that they're dealing with because of the lifestyle that they're living as entrepreneurs. So I thought that was going to be a very, very important topic that needed to be shared with the world. And Jordache does this for a living. She has her own practice in Miami, Florida, serving clients throughout the state of Florida. And she graduated from Florida State University, go Seminoles, and Tallahassee, Florida, with her bachelor's in psychology, and also have her master's in mental health counseling from Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. Am I correct? All right, Boca Raton. And so I am at this point, before I move forward, if you are, make sure you have your microphones on mute. If you do want to ask a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation. It'll just be 15 minutes long. But if you don't want to forget, go ahead and put your question in the chat and we'll ask it after the presentation is done. Okay, same thing for people who are watching live on Facebook. So without further ado, I want to open the floor and jump right into this topic with Jordache Michelle, who is going to enlighten us as far as what we need to be doing to take care of ourselves as entrepreneurs and people in general with our mental health. So Jordache, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ron, for giving me this opportunity. It's truly a pleasure to speak to you all, to talk about something I'm really passionate about, which is mental health counseling. And like Ronald said, I am his cousin, but me and Ron are more like brothers and sisters. Ronald is my brother. And yeah, all of this stemmed from just us having an open conversation about just entrepreneurship. And Ronald and I just kind of like to talk about random things. And this was a really kind of a long conversation for us. And so I really thank him for giving me this opportunity and this platform to talk about mental health counseling. I'm going to open up my screen or share my screen, Ronald. I don't know how do I do that so I can share the PowerPoint. Do I just add at the bottom? Okay, I think I see it.
Ask Edwin, he knows everything.
Edwin does. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. I think, can you all see my screen? Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome.
Yes.
All right, and for those of you, I do have subtitles in Creole. My presentation is not gonna be in Creole. Creole Moy is not as full as I would want it to be. I apologize. So there is some subtitles that on the top for those of you all who just maybe want to just read it in Creole. I don't know if the translation is as good as it could be, but there's some subtitles at the top. So I'm just going to jump right into this. The presentation is mental health and entrepreneurship. And if I can have Ronald moderate this for me, I want to ask a question to the audience. What word comes to mind, or what words come to mind when you think of entrepreneur or entrepreneurship at large? What are some words that come to mind? If you can maybe type it into the text box, you all. Ronald, you're on mute.
Okay, I was saying everybody type it in the chat box. Thanks for that, Josh. What word comes to your mind when you hear entrepreneurship? What words describes an entrepreneur?
For me, it's definitely independence.
Independence, that's a good one. What else?
Flexibility, adaptability.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, with great power comes great responsibility.
Go ahead, Edwin. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yes. Independence, responsibility. Anything else?
We have one in the chat box from Gillian. He says, I see risk.
Risk taking. Risk taking, responsibility, independence. I mean, those are some pretty good descriptive words when we think about entrepreneurs. But what I didn't hear, and which is very telling of how we think about entrepreneurship and entrepreneur as a whole, but we didn't say stressed or anxious, depressed, obsessed, lonely, even. And this is kind of the flip side of entrepreneurship. Of course, there's the independence, the risk-taking, the high stakes that comes with playing the game of, not game, but playing entrepreneurship. But there's also that flip side, the stress, the anxiety, the depression sometimes, the loneliness. Entrepreneurship, as Edwin was alluding to earlier, is the foundation of modern day society. When you think about the responsibility that comes with being an entrepreneur, everything that we see, we touch, we use are the results of the creativity and the innovation of someone who dared to do something differently. The creativity that an entrepreneur brings, it drives economic and social growth, adds to regional and national change. It creates social change, job creation, community development. There's no question that entrepreneurs are vital to the continued advancement of humanity. And so it is for this reason that we need to talk about the plight of the entrepreneur and how it impacts their mental health. I found this really cool meme that I wanted to share with you all today. And I'm going to read it straight from the PowerPoint, but it says, life of an entrepreneur in a single frame. Life of an entrepreneur. It's like a man riding a lion. People are thinking, this guy is brave. And he's thinking, how the heck did I get on this lion? And how do I keep it from eating me or getting eaten? And I thought it spoke to entrepreneurship in a couple of different ways, from two different perspectives. First, from the perspective of the onlookers, the people who are watching. And you can even divide that up into two different groups. You have the people who are watching in complete astonishment, the ones who are proud of you, who are thinking like, gosh, this entrepreneur, this person is so brave. And then you have the other ones who are watching and like, even kind of watching and waiting for you to fail so they can say, I told you so, or, why did you think that you were better than us to even pursue such a task? And then you have from the perspective of the entrepreneur. I mean, she's riding that lion, she's hustling day in, day out, trying to figure out how to survive this, how to make her business flourish, how to do virtually the impossible, some might think. And I think it's from these two places is where mental health surfaces. From the people, the onlookers, the spectators who are watching the entrepreneur, and then from the lion, which in this situation can be viewed as the business. I mean, the business, or i.e. the lion, demands all your time and all your attention. And that's when mental health starts to manifest. So what is mental health illness? Mental health illness is described as a behavioral or mental pattern that causes significant distress or impairment in a person's functioning. Now, there's a number of key words in that definition, and I'm going to start with impairment in personal functioning. And when I'm diagnosing or when I'm looking at a person's mental health, in order for me to identify whether the person is, deemed impaired or has a mental illness, I'm looking at their personal functioning. And personal functioning is how the person is functioning in their everyday life. And I'm talking about in your professional life. You're with your coworkers, with your colleagues, and if you're the boss, with your employees, in your intimate life, with your husband, your wife, your significant other, your children. And then there's your social life, when you're going out to the grocery store, when you're driving in your car, or any activities that put you in a situation where you're interacting socially. And the things that contributes to your functioning is your that behavioral component at the beginning of the definition, and the mental patterns. And the mental patterns can be broken up into cognitive functioning and feelings. So if you look at the sides, there's the three bubbles. We have cognitive functionings, feelings, and behaviors. Those are the three things that for me make up your personal functioning, or that helps me identify your personal functioning and how you're functioning in your everyday life. So when you think about cognitive functioning, it refers to multiple mental abilities, including learning, thinking, reasoning, remembering. So when we think about impairment in cognitive functioning, we're thinking about memory. Perhaps you're in a situation, or your marked impairment might be you're not remembering things as clearly as you once did, or your attention span is not as wide as it used to be, or you're not concentrating as much as you used to be. And then moving on to feelings. Feelings are simply your emotions. So when you think about impairment in your feelings, it refers to our inability to manage our emotions. An example might be exhibiting emotions that are too intense for a situation, or difficulty calming down when you're upset, or a popular one, which is becoming avoidant or aggressive when dealing with uncomfortable emotions. Now, behavior is more of an easier one. I find that a lot of times when you're asking a person what they're going through or what they're experiencing, they're usually able to identify marked changes in their behavior. So this might be, maybe you're frequently running late to work, or you're being absent in work. Maybe you're becoming a little bit more aggressive towards your loved ones. Maybe you're becoming more violent towards your loved one. So these are examples of more impaired behavioral functionings. And so those are the three major components that I'm looking at when I'm thinking about personal functioning, or when you're looking at mental illness and when you're trying to diagnose a mental illness, or when you're looking at impairment, you're looking at those three major functionings: your cognitive functioning, feelings, and your behaviors. So now that we have maybe a basic understanding of what is mental illness, now let's look at the statistics pertaining to mental illness in entrepreneurs. When Ronald asked me to do this presentation, or when we had our conversation, we were talking about it. Initially, in my mind, I was thinking, well, entrepreneurs are no different from anybody else. People are people. In my mind, I think he asked me a question, and I gave him a response that was kind of generic because I really didn't know that entrepreneurs were different. But when I found these statistics, I mean, it kind of blew my mind because I was like, entrepreneurs are different. I mean, there's literally no question. Um, I'm not going to go over all of these statistics. I'm just going to kind of pull out one or two of them. But even starting with the first one, 49% of entrepreneurs deal with mental health issues directly. But I also have to point out these statistics are based in the United States. Now, Rano and I had a question, was whether or not mental health, would it be stagnant or would it be the same in different regions of the world, or would it change depending on where you are? And I think obviously it does change, but entrepreneurship, I think as a whole, is a very special entity. And even though it might change, and maybe the percentage might be different from where you are, Haiti, or wherever you are in the Caribbean, I do still think that it probably will still be high, or high, just like this 49% in the United States. And granted, like I said, it might not be in the same for Haiti, but I think it'd still be the same. And I'm still doing my research on that. But in the United States, 49% of entrepreneurs deal with mental health directly. And here's another one where 29% of entrepreneurs are likely to experience ADHD. That stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, when you look at these statistics, it suggests that entrepreneurs are different. And even if you're going back to the previous slide, or the meme that I mentioned with the entrepreneur riding a lion, I mean, to some extent, we already knew that entrepreneurs were different. I mean, it takes a special person to go against the status quo, to go against what maybe their community or their family members even are telling them. You can't do this is impossible, or maybe you shouldn't do this. To take such a risk, to decide that they're going to create something, or they're going to build an institution for themselves or for their community at large. But because not everyone dares to do this. An entrepreneur is special. And it's even in that specialness that makes entrepreneurs a little bit more susceptible to developing a mental illness. Some qualities that we even said earlier, some qualities present in the entrepreneur, the creativity, independent thinker, the need to achieve, great tolerance for risk, high levels of motivation, drive, passion. All of these are surprisingly correlated with mental health conditions. So what are the causes? Why is it entrepreneurs are experiencing these mental health conditions at such a higher rate? Now, I have a couple of things listed on the slide. Now, take in consideration, this is not an exhaustive list. These are only a couple of things that I found really important as I was doing my research for this. And no entrepreneur is the same. Some of the causes or some of the perpetuants that perpetuate one entrepreneur in mental health will be different for somebody else. But some of the things that I found that were really important, well, one of the things is lack of work-life balance. Going back to the entrepreneur riding the lion, in my perspective, is not necessarily the lion or the business that's creating that mental health illness, but more so being consumed or being eaten by that lion. When the entrepreneur has no time for their loved ones, for their hobbies, no time for the world at large, it creates feelings of loneliness, disengaging from the world, and leaves the entrepreneur isolated. There's also the financial stress that comes with being an entrepreneur. At any point in your business, it seems like you have to be raising money or need more capital, whether it's in the beginning phases or you're trying to scale it. I mean, some entrepreneurs take their entire life savings and put it towards creating a business. Or you're taking money that's used to pay your family's bills, or to pay your own bills, and you're using it towards your business. You're thinking about, how am I going to pay my bills for next month? Or how am I going to make this scale this company for myself? There's also expectation of self and others. I mean, we have expectations of parents, friends, and family, peers, investors. All of these people in our lives have expectations for ourselves, whether it's for the entrepreneur to succeed or to fail. And the entrepreneur has this, feels this, compels this need to disprove this expectation, whether to meet the expectation of success or to dispel the expectation of failure. And all of this creates a sense of stress for the entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs have another issue when it comes to meeting the expectations of themselves or other people, because entrepreneurs have to feel or must appear confident or composed at all times. If an entrepreneur admits any serious challenges, people start to see them as weak, and therefore they start to lose investors and even support. And so, because of this, entrepreneurs internalize more stress in order to meet the expectations of people and themselves. There's also not letting people down. I mean, earlier we talked about, or I mentioned how, I mean, entrepreneurs, they build communities, they employ people, they create jobs. There's families depending on entrepreneurs. So there is this extreme amount of pressure being placed on the entrepreneur to have their vision succeed in order for them to continue to put food sometimes on people's tables. There's also the imposter syndrome, feeling as if you're a fraud, feeling as if this is all luck, the self-doubt, feeling as if you're not good enough, feeling as if you don't have what it takes to make this business succeed. I mean, all of these things are the causes, or even some of them are the causes, or things that perpetuate the entrepreneur into developing a mental health illness. And all of these combined are issues that create mental illness in the family. In the previous slide, in the ones with the statistics, one of the points were that 23% of entrepreneurs have family members who face this issue. When we are going through, or when we decide to start a business, we're not doing it alone. And even though maybe we're the ones that's doing the grunt work, that's drawing up the plans, that's doing the elevator pitches, but our family is in that boat with us. They're the ones that's seeing us when we're not sleeping. They're the ones that's seeing us when we don't have that work-life balance. They're the ones that's seeing that perhaps there's not enough money to buy groceries or clothes for the kids. And it's so no wonder that our family members are also experiencing these mental health ailments at high rates as well. In addition to some of these points that I mentioned on the screen, there's also the excess levels of stress that the entrepreneur experiences on a daily basis. For those of you who are watching from Haiti, so on top of managing your business and constructing your business, you're also dealing with the political environment of being in Haiti and all the things that's going on in Haiti. And so coupled with trying to manage your business, coupled with situations that might be going on in your family as well. So there's so many stress factors that contributes to the entrepreneur developing mental illness on a professional level and on a personal level, oscillating from extreme highs to extreme lows. I mean, one day you might get a contractor or maybe an investor who's very interested in your company, and then 2 days from now you receive an email that says, we're no longer interested in furthering business with you. I mean, right there, you're going from extremely high to extremely low. It's no wonder that the entrepreneur develops these mental ailments. Then there's like directing your work accomplishments to yourself, i.e., if my business is successful, then I'm successful. If my business is a failure, if my business fail, then I'm therefore a failure. There's a myriad of lists of things that might contribute to the development of a mental health illness in an entrepreneur. So what does it look like? What does it look like in the entrepreneur? Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is only a handful of things that I've just kind of pulled out and I thought were significant. But when we think about mental ailments in an entrepreneur, it might look like depression, long periods of intense sadness. And depression might manifest differently in each entrepreneur. Perhaps it's not sadness in one person. Maybe it's feeling an increased sadness, or I said sadness, well, increased sadness or feeling like there's no joy, emptiness, lack of joy. right? Sometimes we only think as depression as the sadness, but there's also the absence of emotion or the absence of joy. It might look as like addiction to drugs, sex, shopping, suicide. Suicide is something that I find, suicide is a very important factor, because a lot of times when I'm talking to people of color, African Americans, or people from the Caribbean, the assumption is that, oh no, we don't do that. Suicide is not something that we do or believe in. But the statistics or the studies or the research suggest that's not true. Black people, Caribbean people do commit suicide, especially entrepreneurs. I mean, if you look at a lot of the research, and as I was doing all the research, there were a list of high-ranking entrepreneurs who committed suicide. I mean, they're at the pinnacle of their career, and the only way they knew to stop it was to end their lives. But there's suicide in other ways too, right? So there's suicide by diet, where we're purposely contaminating our bodies with junk that we should not be ingesting or putting into our bodies, because we don't care about the outcome, or at that point, we don't care. There's suicide by homicide, putting ourselves in situations where we end our lives. Suicide by the addiction to drugs. And also suicide by medical illness, where we purposely disregard medical attention, or we purposely don't take our medication. So sometimes it's not death by suicide or death by ending our lives. There's suicide in other ways. And yes, suicide exists for Black people, or for Caribbeans, for Haitian people. It exists. It looks like insomnia, inability to be present. And it also looks like burnout. When you get to the point where you're just completely emotionally and physically exhausted, that you just can't do anything. You can't engage in your life like you once did. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is only a couple of things that I found that I thought were significant. But it might look differently in a number of us. What it would look like for me would not be the way it would look like for Ron or for anybody else. So how do we combat this? How do we get ourselves to the place that we can be prepared for when it does come? And so there's this assumption that it's not going to happen to me, but it can. And the research suggests that it does. So how do we get ourselves to the place that we can combat it when it does? The first one, and I don't have it on the list, is get access to mental health care if it's possible. If you're at a place, or if you have the means to reach out to a therapist or to psychiatrists, do it. But before you can get to that place, it starts with like moving away from the shame or the stigma associated with mental health. We have to stop thinking about mental health as a weakness. Stop thinking about mental health as crazy or mental health is less than. Stop being afraid to have this conversation. My mom, and I love my mom to pieces. When I used to tell my mom, Mom, I'm feeling really sad. The first thing she would do is, why are you feeling sad? There's no reason for you to be sad. And automatically it tells you, I was a young person, a teenager at the time. But when we start doing these things, or when we start telling, oh, there's no reason to be sad, or why are you sad? It automatically tells the person, no, stop, that doesn't exist. Or you don't need to feel that emotion. That's not a thing you need to go through. And that automatically puts the shame, and that puts the stigma. Oh, why am I feeling sad? There's no reason for me to be sad. And therefore it's a bad emotion. I don't need to feel this. But emotions are just emotions, right? They're neither good nor bad. They just communicate needs to us. But it starts by moving away from the shame and the stigma associated with mental health. And me, as a person that's a part of the Haitian community, I know in my community there is a lot of shame associated with mental health. Not so much with medical health, right? Like if tomorrow or today, if I'm talking to somebody who has cancer, she won't tell me that, people are thinking that I'm crazy because I developed cancer. But if I'm talking about depression, she's like, oh no, I can't tell my family I have depression. That's not a thing in my Haitian family or my Haitian household. But it also starts by high-ranking people, or people like you all, entrepreneurs, talking openly about the experiences that you guys experience on a daily basis. I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely. When we start having open conversations about these experiences, we then are able to move away from the stigma and the shame associated with it. The next thing is having some introspection. Start by knowing what it looks like for you when you become emotionally dysregulated, i.e. unbalanced, right? Are you short with your partner? Are you feeling like you need to drink alcohol every day? Are you shopping excessively? Are you watching porno, 14 or 15 hours a day, not sleeping? And perhaps maybe it's an absence of behavior. Then when you start really looking inside of you, be intentional on a daily basis and ask yourself basic questions like, what am I feeling right now? How do I feel it right now? And having such conversation with yourself on a regular basis. Getting connected is also a good one too. And when I mean getting connected, I mean really being intentional about who you're communicating with on a daily basis. Not just doing it online. I mean like calling up a cousin, calling up your sister, calling up your best friend that maybe you haven't spoken to in a month. Going out for a walk if you can, meeting up for coffee if you can, having them over for dinner. Setting time to do these things. When we talk about that work-life balance, penciling it in. A cousin of mine, I love her to pieces. I mean, she's a busy woman and she sent me a calendar request for us to meet up, to just talk, maybe like 3 weeks in advance. I mean, she penciled it into her schedule. She was very intentional about it. And I thought that was just beautiful, right? And I do the same thing when I'm navigating my life with my husband, with my kids. I'm intentional about having a calendar, writing down what I'm doing in that day. And I'm penciling time for me to spend time with my husband, penciling time for me to just go outside and play with my kids. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to do it eventually. We have to be intentional about it. Another one is exercise. It's one of those things that we know are good for us, but we're like, I'm going to do it eventually. I mean, just incorporating 30 minutes of high intensity exercising, or maybe not so much, low intensity walking, shows significant benefits to our mental health. Eating healthier, we already know that. Meditation and prayer. There are studies that show that prayer access the same wavelength as meditation. So if you're not a praying person, if you're a person that doesn't necessarily pray, engage in meditation. Meditation does the same thing in terms of accessing certain wavelengths that's beneficial to our mental health. Journaling. Journaling is a good one when you just kind of sit there and write down your thoughts, your feelings, your emotional. Maybe you're just writing out what happened in the day. A really good tidbit too, there's this thing called rumination, when you can't get your brain to stop. Your brain is going miles and miles per hour. Just kind of sitting down and writing what's going on in your brain is a way to tell your brain, okay, I'm remembering, I'll do it. Because what's happening with rumination is that it's our brain a way of telling us, hey, don't forget this. Don't forget to do this. Don't forget to do this. Don't forget to do this. So an easy way is to jot it down. And it kind of communicates to the brain, okay, she's remembering it. Another thing is to question those thoughts that don't serve a purpose. Going back to someone who might develop an imposter syndrome, you might have such thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or I shouldn't be doing this, or what the heck am I doing? I mean, really sitting down and evaluating what's those automatic thoughts. Are those automatic thoughts useful to my goal? Are they going to help me achieve my goal? When I keep telling myself, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough to do this, it's going to help me become, this entrepreneur that I'm trying to pursue, or this business plan that I'm trying to pursue. I'm just asking those questions empirically can help us really realize, hey, this thought isn't purposeful, or this thought isn't useful, and then replacing that thought with a more useful thought. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, we can say, I'm not at where I want to be. Or in 5 years, I want to be here. Let me work on being there in 5 years, as opposed to saying I'm not good enough. And the last thing on this list is just simply playing. I mean, going out there and playing with the kids, or playing your favorite sport, or just kind of engaging in any activity that's fun. I mean, there's so many research that suggests that playing, again, access certain brain waves in our brain, and also is a very important source of relaxation and stimulation. Literally going out there and having fun. I think about, I'm sorry, I've been thinking about myself, and I have a 2-year-old daughter. And a couple of weeks ago, I was feeling really intensely stressed about a situation that was going on. And what I did was, instead of focusing on the stress that I had or the problem that I had, I mean, I just simply went outside and we were just running around, throwing balls, playing, and she was jumping all over me. And in that moment, I was experiencing so much joy that it helped me disconnect for those high feelings of stresses that I was experiencing because of that moment. Um, and that's all you have to do. Literally disengaging or disconnecting for a minute or 2 minutes, because there's a lot of studies that suggest when we're in it for long periods of time, that is something else that also propels us into that mental health imbalancement or imbalancing. We're just stepping out of it for a couple of minutes and playing, journaling, meditation, exercising are ways that we can help combat mental health ailments. I see Ronald on the screen here. I think this is his way of saying it's time for me to cut it off. But this is the end of the presentation either way. But thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk. And in this time, I really hope that we can really have an authentic conversation. And again, this presentation was not all encompassing. There's so many things that was not incorporated in this presentation that I really hope that we can have a conversation about. I'm going to go on to the last screen. This is the last screen, my last PowerPoint, my last thing, Ronald, has my name and my information. If anybody wanted to contact me or maybe even get my resources and how I came up with these numbers, I can email resources and we can just kind of a conversation as well.
Okay, thanks, Josh. That was not my way of kicking you off. I actually was just preparing just in case you were finishing. But thank you. You know, I have quite a few questions, and I think a lot of people probably have questions for you too. So at this point, you know, we're going to open the floor for questions. Let me kick it off just with a question that I have. And if you have a question and you want to write it in the chat, you can start writing now, and then or just raise your hand, and then we'll unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and then ask your question. But first, again, great presentation, a lot of information, and I know this is like the tip of the iceberg because we talked about a lot. And I wish we could have recorded that conversation or shared it with everybody, but I know, you know, this is kind of a spur of the moment. But, you know, one of the questions that I, you know, I think about when it comes to, I know, and you know, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and there is something that we don't touch on a lot, but I see it, and then, you know, naturally as a human being, as somebody myself who's in business, it's something I naturally think about myself as well, or, you know, projects that I'm working on, that comparison aspect of things, right? Entrepreneurs, or people in general, I should say, there's always that natural comparison, right? I remember somebody was asking, they were comparing themselves to me, or, you know, I remember I was doing that too at one point, like, you know, okay, here, I'm 25 years old, that person's 25, and they've got like, you know, $900 million. And okay, am I even good enough to get there? I'm just not good enough. I'm not smart. I'm dumb. You know, I can't make it there. Or, you know, this person started this project a year ago and look where they are. And then I've been working on this for 2 years or 5 years, and I'm still not where I need to be. Is that bad? Completely bad? I mean, somewhat in my mind, I kind of look at it as, okay, it's kind of good to sometimes compare yourself to kind of see, okay, maybe what you're not doing and what you should be doing. But in general, too, since I know so many people do that, is there a balance to that? Should we move away from that altogether? Or should we balance it out in the sense of looking at where somebody is and maybe not, maybe being upset or angry with them? And I don't know. I don't know if that question makes sense, but
yeah.
Is there a healthy balance with it? Can you even control that?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And to some extent, yeah, some people have over years have found a way to control that, to answer that last part of the question. But healthy comparison, it's not a problem, or it's not something that we should be thinking like, oh my gosh, we need to completely dispel or have nothing to do with. as long as it's healthy, that keyword, right? Healthy comparison. Because there is some advantages to when we're looking at other people and comparing ourselves or putting ourselves against other people. It can help build motivation. It can help us work a little harder. It can help us, there's a lot of benefits to that healthy comparison. It's problematic when we start to have some thoughts that you mentioned earlier. I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not X, Y, and Z. Bottom line is, I'm just not enough. That's when it becomes problematic. That's when it no longer serves a beneficial purpose or of propelling us to the next level or helping us work a little harder. It just becomes degrading at that point. It becomes problematic and it becomes self-sabotaging. So there is a healthy balance, and of course, everybody has their own. They have to know who they are to get to that healthy balance or figure out what is that healthy balance for themselves. I know for me personally, I'm one of those people that kind of stays away, monitor my social media intake, right? Because I know when I see too much bombardment, when I see too much of that, I start to then question my success, or I start to question what I'm doing. I start to question, I have those thoughts like, maybe I need to be doing X, Y, and Z, as opposed to allowing myself to follow my own journey or to follow my own path. I start to have a lot of self-doubt. So I know I have to stay away from social media or watch my consumption of social media. So it's not a bad thing to have comparison. In fact, in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a tool that I use to help my clients, there's a tool that I use in like the comparison tool. So if I have a client, I can say this, I used 2 weeks ago, a client of mine was like, I'm so pathetic. And so we had this continuum from 1 to 10, right? So with 1 being no patheticness and 10 being, the most pathetic you could absolutely be. My question to her was, you think you're so pathetic? Who is the most pathetic person you ever met in your entire life? I know it sounds a little bit strange saying it out loud, or kind of saying it to people who are not in therapy, or maybe. But when a person starts to then maybe put themselves compared to that next person, it might help them gain some perspective on what is reality. Okay, maybe I'm not as pathetic as I thought I was. Maybe I'm only like maybe 20% pathetic when I think of a person that's doing really atrocities in the United States and doing some real atrocities in the world. So it helps gain some perspective when you compare yourself. But in some place, it becomes problematic because you have those thoughts, I'm not smart enough, and I'm not good enough. So we really have to be mindful of our thought process and what's happening to us when we start comparing ourselves. Because when those thoughts start to come into place, we know that we're not in the right space, or we're not in the right arena, and we should kind of back off and tell off on that.
Gotcha. Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's okay if we're comparing ourselves, if it's giving us the right kind of responses. So for example, when I see somebody, I'm like, man, that motivates me. I'm about to go hard for like the next 2 weeks and make this happen. I'm going to try to achieve that goal, right? Or I can do that. In that sense, it's not that bad, right? But if we start talking negatively, where we're like, oh, I'm not good enough, why would I consider that? Then it becomes problematic.
Yeah, I mean, we're social creatures, so social comparison is part of the game, right? It's part of us being social people. So there's going to be some natural comparison, but again, like you said, when it becomes problematic, when we start to develop negative self-talk or negative self-belief, that's when we know we need to pull away from it, or we need to kind of evaluate how much of social comparison am I doing, and is it healthy for me?
Gotcha. Okay, so est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui a une question dans l'audience là? If you have a question, write it in the chat, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. We'll check Facebook as well for those people who might be asking while there.
Yes, I have a question. Actually, I have multiple ones.
Yeah.
I really want to take the time to thank the Bell Initiative, Ronald, AFPEC, and as well as Jordash for taking the time to talk about such an important topic. One of the things I'd like to add to actually the exchange that you just did is we need to understand that comparison is just an action, right? Comparison is just an action, but what is the motivation behind that comparison? If I compare myself to people in order to seek inspiration, then there's nothing wrong with that comparison. The comparison is just, again, a means to an end. I compare myself to Mike Tyson all the time. I do not have muscles. I do not box. I have nothing in common with the guy, right? But I do not watch all these videos to feel bad about my body type. I do not watch all these videos to feel bad about, oh man, I never want to fight in my life. But I do watch it looking for that inspiration, like, whoa, what motivates that guy to keep achieving for so long and so well, right? So the comparison itself is just a means to an end. I'm just looking for that inspiration. Now, where the mental health aspect comes is sometimes the person does the action, the comparison action, in order to put themselves down. Like they do that purposely, right? And and the problem with mental health is like all of these things is like a momentum. When you're already depressed, you automatically feel like doing that to put yourself even like on lower, right? So it's really important that the mindset is where it starts. Comparison is just an action, but the mindset, where is your mind right now that you're gonna do the comparison? So again, there's nothing wrong with it, but you need to make sure that your mind is in the right place before you do it. So that was just an addendum, I would say. But my question to you, Jordash, and I'm glad that you said you were surprised when you saw all those statistics and realized, oh my God, entrepreneurs are very different. So I'm glad this is kind of new to you. Me, the way I see it is we fell for it. There's a confusion between an entrepreneur and someone undertaking entrepreneurship. And I believe it's two different things. I think an entrepreneur is a personality trait. I'm a big proponent of the Myers-Briggs personality type. And I think there's a personality type that is an entrepreneur. And I think there's a whole nother concept of just people attempting entrepreneurship. I don't have the personality type of an entrepreneur, for example, but typically I'm an architect. My personality type is architect, but I am doing that entrepreneurship thing, and depending on me knowing my strengths and weaknesses, like what does being an architect helps me do better and what are my weaknesses, I can then navigate that entrepreneurship undertaking based on my strengths and weaknesses. So I think it's really important to make that separation, right? And the entrepreneur type, the actual entrepreneur, is the risk taker, is the person who's super extroverted and etc. Now, this person will have different mental difficulties in undertaking entrepreneurship than someone who's not even an entrepreneur type undertaking entrepreneurship. Right. So that's the first part where, we need to really switch our lenses to focus on that. So now my question to you is, don't you think someone who's not an entrepreneur type, someone who's not out, let's say, quote unquote, I don't believe in that, but let's just say quote unquote, who's not born an entrepreneur, faces has a greater possibility of facing mental health issues when undertaking entrepreneurship as an activity?
You pose, that's a really great question, Edwin. Thank you for adding your insight and posing such a question. Before I answer the question, I also want to make note that personality types, and I thank you for bringing up the Myers-Briggs personality scales and personality continuums as well. And keep in mind that personality types, personality is on a continuum. And so we mentioned, as we were speaking, it almost seems as if these things are distinct, right? This personality or this entrepreneur type person versus this entrepreneur who embarked on entrepreneurship as kind of, just something that they're taking on, but they're not necessarily a personality type. Take in consideration, these things lie on the continuum, and it's not necessarily a distinctive thing, whereas entrepreneurship personality type is here, and the other entrepreneur person who embarks on this activity is on this side of town, and they don't mix essentially. The person who's engaging in this entrepreneurship quest or entrepreneurship journey, they're just as likely to develop some of these qualities that sometimes we might think are distinctive or completely separate from the person, i.e., whatever we're thinking. If we're thinking high risk taker, or we're thinking person with an intense drive or innovation or creativity. There's no thing that this thing is separately on this side and it doesn't bleed into that person. It doesn't bleed into the next personality type. So the question is, do I think that people with the supposed entrepreneurship type personality is a little bit more susceptible to developing this mental health ailments? Yes. And I also think this person who supposedly doesn't have entrepreneurship personality type is just as likely to develop mental health ailments as well, because these things are not distinct. These things are on a continuum, and you might not have this personality trait now, but perhaps perhaps it develops later on. Perhaps it bleeds into your newfound entrepreneurship journey. So we can't think of it as something that's completely distinct. And just because I don't have this personality type, I'm therefore less able to develop such mental health ailments, because it's quite frankly not true. Just the fact that we're embarking on such a journey makes us susceptible, regardless of certain personality traits that might make us different, if that makes sense. Anybody?
Thank you. And I think there's a part where my point wasn't that one is more likely to get mental illness issues where compared to the other. It's more like those issues are going to be different. For example, someone who's not shy will have better success at sales, will have better success at negotiation meetings, etc. Whereas someone who's introverted and is not like totally breaks down, like shuts down when it comes to interactions, will have more no's. And the more no an entrepreneur gets, and especially if you don't have a brand that's going to become an interface. And you mentioned that in your presentation, some entrepreneurs believe that they are the business. If the business loses a client, they feel like they lost someone. So they integrate all of that, right? So those two scenarios are not going to be perceived the same way. The person who's extroverted will perform better in the sales department, in the negotiations department. So it will be harder for that person to suffer mental illnesses that have to do with feeling rejected and etc. Versus someone who's super shy and introverted, he will take the event personally. I will feel like, oh my God, I wasn't good enough. I can't believe I lost the client, etc. So that's why my overall point was the initial personality, whether it's an architect, whether it's an entrepreneur, etc., matters a lot in how are you going to perform under the pressure of the activity of entrepreneurship. That's what I wanted to.
Oh, okay. I definitely see where you're coming from. I definitely see where you're coming from, and you're completely right in that the presentation of mental health will look differently in all of us. But it doesn't mean that because this person is a shy person, therefore they're going to develop this type of mental health ailment, and because this person is an extroverted person, they're going to develop this type of mental health ailment. I don't know if I was understanding it correctly. We're different people, and we all have different chemical makeup, and which makes us more predisposed to developing different types of thinking patterns. Not only that, we also have to take in consideration childhood upbringing, where they're being upbringed. There's so many different factors that we contribute in terms of what a person develops or what they don't develop. And it's not necessarily just because this person has this background or this personality type that makes them develop X mental health ailment or this mental health complication. These things aren't necessarily factors. It's mostly, thinking patterns, childhood development, personal issues at the current moment. those are really more indicative of what type of mental ailment a person develops. Not necessarily what personality type they have now and as it pertains to how they interact with entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship as a whole. Depending on who you are and your chemical makeup, the mental health element that you develop will be drastically different from another person, regardless if this person is an introvert or extroverted or an architect or a scientist or a mental health professional. It's just going to be different all around. If I feel like I'm answering the question, I don't know, maybe.
He said, thank you.
Oh.
So Dion has a question, and then Guerrier has a question. I'm gonna go with Guerrier's question, which is in the chat, and then Dion, I'm gonna you can ask your question right after. So the question in the chat is, because entrepreneurship can generate bad mental health, what is the best way to begin in entrepreneurship? I suppose that has more so to do with maybe the mindset that you have to have going into it. So
Yeah.
what is your answer to that question?
I mean, that is a complicated and very difficult question. I don't think that there is a set way to go and embark on entrepreneurship in order to, obviously to help yourself not develop a mental health element. And I think it starts by developing or having good skills in the beginning, right? So making sure that it's just like when you're preparing for a marathon. You're going to make sure you're hydrating. You're going to make sure that you're eating correctly. You're going to make sure you have certain things in place to protect you while you're running this marathon or while you're embarking on the journey of a marathon. And just like when you decide to go or pursue something or pursue entrepreneurship, just making sure that you have a certain mentality in place. If I need help, I'm going to ask for it. I think that's just maybe the basic stepping stone on helping you, get to next level entrepreneurship, or just to be healthy, mentally healthy as you're going through your entrepreneurship journey. If I need help, I will ask for help. Making boundaries or setting boundaries between your business and your family and your friends. Setting an adequate time where you're engaging with your family, when you're engaging with your friends, when you're engaging with your loved ones, and being really serious about that. Just because you have this passion and you have your business doesn't mean that you need to be all in consumed by it and that you don't pay attention to other things in your life. Having those really serious boundaries is very important. I'm going to bring Ron into this because Ron is one of my favorite people. Ron has this thing where he's not doing business on Saturdays. Like, don't text him. He's not texting you, or he's not calling you, or he's not functioning on Saturday because he has set boundaries. And yes, he's an entrepreneur, and yes, he has multiple businesses at a time. But he set time apart on Saturdays where he's engaging with himself, engaging with his loved ones, and not doing his entrepreneurship so that he can take care of himself. And just doing things like that is setting yourself up or helping you prepare for better mental health outcome. So we talked about getting help, asking help for whenever you need it, setting up those boundaries, and having open conversations with the people in your life. Like, hey, I'm doing this really hard thing. I need you guys to, put me on track whenever I'm getting off track. I think those three things to start with will definitely set you up and put you far above the rest.
Edwin said something that I was actually thinking. So literally, as I thought it, like a second after he typed it, and after I read the question, and I want you to give your feedback on this. But his answer was step one: know yourself, and that's something I'm like. I was naturally saying it to myself, like, okay, first you got to know yourself so you can know, your skill set, who you are, what are your boundaries? Are you already a risk taker? Are you conservative? So when you go into things, like, you're not trying to be something you're not. Like, if you're not, like, for example, if you're not a workaholic and you're trying to take on a project that's going to require a lot of hard labor, studying, countless hours, and you don't have that kind of discipline, you might need to think about, some of these things, especially going into entrepreneurship or going into business for yourself. If you don't like, for example, any kind of order, I think those are things you have to naturally, I'm thinking, you can let me know, I'm kind of thinking that naturally you have to think about, because you're running something now when you're going into entrepreneurship. You know, you're running a business. So it's not like going to work. When you go to work and you like getting mad at your boss because they're getting paid a high salary and, you know, they're telling you what to do and they seem like really tight on things. Now when you become an entrepreneur, you're now going to understand why they're getting paid such a high salary.
Yeah.
You know, why they're on time, why they're weaving down people's necks, because they're trying to keep something alive. They have to put food in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
They have to make sure everybody is getting paid and their reputation's on the line. So, what do you think about that? Step one, know yourself.
I think that is excellent. And it's reminding me of, I'm going to bring a little bit of myself into the situation of when I was getting married. Before I was getting married, and I was like, I know I want to get married. I know what it means to be married. I know what I'm doing, right? And then I get married, and then 3 months, 4 months in the wedding or after the wedding, I'm like, what the heck did I do? What did I get into? I have no idea what it means to be married. And so going back or drawing this kind of comparison, before you get into this realm of entrepreneurship or what it means for you to be an entrepreneur, you might not know what it means, right? Like, so you're jumping into this situation. You have no idea what it means to be an entrepreneur, just like I had no idea what it means to be married to another person. You think you know, you have this idea and whatever, so you jump into it. But yeah, it's knowing yourself and then being able to adjust when you find out what it actually means, for you to be in such a space. Because
Right.
it's going to mean differently for all of us, right? What it means for me to be an entrepreneur is not necessarily the same thing for Ron. What it means for me to be a woman, a mother, a wife, and such as an entrepreneur is not the same thing as somebody else.
Right.
So definitely when you're getting into this situation, knowing yourself and being okay with changing things, being okay with forcing yourself to grow, being okay to figuring out new ways to function as you get into this role of entrepreneurship. I might know myself as an individual, but I don't know myself as an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's going into that space and figuring out, oh crap, I have no idea what it means to do this. So now I have to change some stuff. Just like when I became a wife, I had no idea what it meant to be a wife. I had to change some stuff around. I had to change the way that I was functioning in my individual space so that it function in the space that I share with my husband. And the same thing as entrepreneurship. Like, what it meant for me to be a wife to my husband is a completely different thing. What it means for me to be a partner with my husband in this entrepreneurship journey. So I know I thought I knew who myself, or I know myself as that person, but then getting to know myself as an entrepreneur is a different feat too, right? You change, you evolve, you grow, and it definitely starts by knowing yourself and being okay with the change that comes about when you start to completely take on this role of entrepreneur. Being okay with failure, being okay with not knowing, and then having those cushions to support you when those things happen. And you realize, like, oh man, I'm failing at this. You know, you having your support people in place to help you, having certain mentalities or certain thought process. The fact that you can even begin to conceptualize yourself before entrepreneurship means that I can do it while I'm in entrepreneurship as well. Knowing yourself component, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really good. I mean, it's not something I actually thought about. You know, what am I? Who am I as an entrepreneur, and how different is that for me? So I think, I think that was a very, very good response to that. Dion, I don't know if you have questions to get question. I'm not sure if
I know. I don't really have a question, more of like a statement.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that Edwin stated that I guess some like being born as an entrepreneur. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But then I was thinking, I'm like, I don't think there's, in my opinion, I don't think someone can be born being an entrepreneur. I think like sometimes is, how you were raised and the people around you. For example, I was born and raised in Haiti, came here and everything. And the schools that I went to, my surroundings were different from where I am right now in my life. And right now in my life with my friends, we talk about different things. We talk about growth, where like now I want to venture out. I want to own properties. I want to do these different things. So I feel as if like, it's not so much being born like that. It's what you're exposed to. For example, Donald Trump, right? Where he owned these businesses. He was able to do that because his father did that, where he was introduced to these things. So I don't think it's so much of him being born as an entrepreneur, but what he was exposed to from childhood.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, what do you think about that, Josh?
Thank you for that comment or that statement. It kind of lends itself to the nature versus nurture argument. Are we born this, or did nature construct us into this? Yeah, I don't know. What came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't think that we are constant people, in that if we're this today, we have to be that tomorrow, or we were this yesterday, so therefore we have to be this today. I believe I agree with both Edwin and Dion in that there are personality types that are distinct and that are different, and that lends itself, that gives you more an edge in entrepreneurship. And I also believe that we are created from our environments, from the people that we're around, from the conversations that we're having on a daily basis. The thought process that I'm having now in my adulthood is not something that I was having when I was 20. Whereas some people, they knew that they're entrepreneurs since elementary school. I was reading an article on a woman. She was selling chips and candies in her elementary school, and now she owns all these businesses as an adult now. So, I mean, I agree with both. There maybe some of us are born with some natural edges that makes us kind of like awesome entrepreneurs. And perhaps some of us, we are in situations that kind of propel us into entrepreneurship, and something that we weren't thinking 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, so I want to dive in. Now, I want to let you know we are at the hour mark, so I'm trying to see if you're cool. If you got somewhere to run, I know your time is important.
Now,
Okay,
so they're gonna come knocking down the door, so we have until the baby decides.
Okay. So we're not gonna take too much more of your time, but I got another question for you.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs. So we know mental health is important. I know you mentioned you had a client who, or a cousin, must not be me, so maybe I'm not your favorite cousin. That books themselves on your calendar, right? As entrepreneurs, let's take it from a startup perspective, right? Somebody who's just starting a business, who might just be starting a business, jumping into entrepreneurship. And let's say mental health is a very important thing. We want to invest in mental health, right? That's a twofold question. One, should we be even bothering with investing in mental health? Is that something that's based on if we know who we are, we know we're like super, I don't know, emotional, can be, we've had instances in the past. So should we look at investing in mental health like we're investing in our business? And then two, even as an entrepreneur, like I know an entrepreneur now who he's opened up and talks about how he's dealt with depression. He's written a book on it and kind of giving advice on how he's dealt with it. And sometimes even now he has to kind of break away and take a break because he does have this anxiety sometimes that comes over him. Are there even mental health therapists for entrepreneurs? Does anybody focus on that? Can they make it affordable if somebody's starting up? Because you're a therapist. I'm not gonna say you. I don't know if you bring in the big bucks, making it rain on you. But from my perspective, I've always thought therapists were very expensive. These are for the CEOs who, that want to pay $100,000 to sit on the couch. Am I thinking about this the wrong way? Can entrepreneurs, startups, for example, afford mental health therapy? And that's good. And I start with the startups because I deal with a lot of startups. I work with people who are in startup areas. So I'm just wondering, is that something that's accessible to them? And should they even invest in their mental health like that? And if not, what are some ways they can invest in their mental health if they can't get a therapist?
So there's a couple of things that you mentioned, and I don't remember everything, but I remember having a visceral reaction to, I think you said, is it necessary for everyone, or something along that lines? I don't know if that's something. But my immediate response was, yes, it's necessary for everyone, no matter if you're thinking like, oh yeah, I am, quote unquote sane, because there's that misconception in that saying that stigma that comes around with mental health, and that like, only the quote unquote crazies or the people who are unstable or X, Y, and Z are people who go into mental health counseling. But personally, if you have a brain and you experience emotions, you should go to counseling. Going to counseling is just like going to your primary care doctor for a checkup. Let me make sure everything is working properly. Let me make sure my thought processes are going. Let me just have somebody else that just give me unbiased feedback about how I'm functioning in my day-to-day life. So yes, I think it's necessary. I think it's part of what we should be doing as a community, as a culture. I personally, in my house, mental health counseling is something that we talk about on a daily basis. My son knows, like, hey mom, if he needs to check in with a therapist, like, mom, it's time for my mental health check-in. No problem, baby. Let me get you connected. It's not a stigma. It's not something that means something wrong with him. It's not something that means anything of the sort. It's just a place where he goes in and he talks about his emotional reasonings, his mental processing, and things that are just going on with him, things that he cannot talk about with me or his dad or anybody else. When I need somebody to bounce something off, or if I'm going through something, I'm checking in with a therapist. The same thing with my husband, and when my daughter gets of age, it'll be the same thing with her, because it's just like going to a primary care doctor. And that's what we need to start doing, or start thinking about mental health counseling. If we're going to a doctor on a regular basis and checking whatever you check at a primary care doctor, the same thing happens with mental health. The problem is sometimes we wait till there is a problem, and that's when we decide that we should be checking in with the mental health or checking in with the doctor. And by that time, sometimes we're at stage 3 cancer, and it's going to be a lot of treatment, or whatever you want to call it, in order to kill this cancer out. And the same thing that happens with our mental health. Sometimes we've lived with our negative thought process, our cognitive distortions, the emotional dysregularity. We've been dealing with it for so long, and we're at a point, or we're at a place where it's difficult to come back. Sometimes this leads to suicide. Sometimes it leads to the suicide by eating, suicide by homicide. But yes, it's necessary. In terms of affordability, I like to think that you will afford whatever you decide you want to afford. There are people make concessions in their lives.
It's true.
I'm a cheap person. I'm a very, very cheap person. But if I see something on the internet that I want, I will make the concession to buy it. That's what it boils down to. If you want something, you will put money aside to afford it, or either make that concession and make that part of, paying a bill. I know I have to pay my phone bill every month. Let me go ahead and put it in my mental health plan. Or as opposed to getting all those features on the iPhone, if people have iPhones, or all the features on the Samsung, perhaps let me take $20 a month out of that so I can put into my mental health jar so that I can get mental health care. It is an investment. It is. I'm not even gonna lie. It is an investment, but you will make, or you will afford what you want to afford. For those of us who really don't have access to a therapist. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ron, I keep interrupting you.
No, I said that's true.
Yeah, well, for those of us who really don't have access to mental health care, finding really supportive people in our life can help with that. And so it's difficult sometimes to find those supportive people, or to find people who can help us with our mental health challenges, but they exist. People who are unbiased, people who want you to thrive, people who can sit in your uncomfortable emotions. Somebody have a comment?
I think somebody just
like I mentioned earlier, sometimes when I used to mention to my mom, like, I'm sad, I'm feeling really, really sad, her first response was to try to make it better, but in her making it better, she was kind of telling me, don't talk about your sadness, because I ain't trying to hear that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But finding people who are okay and comfortable to listen to your sadness, to just share space with you, share those really uncomfortable emotions with you. And I can come to you and say, Ronald, I'm feeling really, really sad. And you're like, I'm here with you, Josh. Let's sit down and let me just be present with you. If you can find people in your life that's just willing to be present and share space with you, that's adequate as well.
Okay.
Sometimes mental health care is not an option.
Yeah. So really, I guess when it comes to, well, before I go into that, because I want to make sure I'm not talking over this Slummy. Did I say it right? I don't know if you have a question. I heard you say something earlier. They're not unmuted, so. Okay, cool. So if I have a good support circle, because I'm not gonna lie, I don't have like a counselor except Allison. Like she's the lucky person that my wife gets to hear all the everything that I go through, and you know, you of course I get to talk to you. So this and I get to talk to my sisters, right? Stephanie, she's kind of like we kind of lean on each other sometimes when we talk about different things in business and kind of what we're going through. This is just, you saying that's just as good as having a mental health therapist, right?
It's a I can't say it's
If it's not anything extreme, like you know, if I'm not like dealing with any kind of addiction, but I just kind of need to vent, you know, looking for positivity, encouragement, having that good circle, are you saying is pretty good to stimulate and keep my mind healthy?
yes. Having a good circle is definitely ways to help you in combating the mental health elements. Now, I'm not going to say it's exactly the same thing because it's not. You know, having supportive people and having a licensed professional therapist are two different things, right? Like, your supportive person probably isn't using therapeutic tools to help you overcome certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in that supportive person, they might still be biased in some ways. And even in the information that they're able to tell you might be sometimes biased or maybe restrictive, because perhaps obviously they're not therapists or counselors, so they're not going to tell you certain things that I would or somebody else who's not close to you would. So is it exactly the same thing? No, it's not necessarily the same thing, but that is definitely a tool that you use, that you should be using to help you in your mental health journey. But it's not replacement for mental health care.
Okay, so I got another question. I'm gonna take a twist on you, but I'm gonna wait. Dion just raised her hand again, so let me let Dion go first.
I was going to say I totally agree with Joraj, because I don't have a set therapist, but from time to time, every couple of years, I have to reset myself, right? Though I have my husband I can rely on and I talk his head off, and I have a very good friend of mine where I can call her at any time, at any day, and I talk my head off to her. And I have my sisters, but at the same time, sometimes you need that professional that's able to help you even more. So, you know, once every 2 years, I will call my old therapist and I'll speak to her, and it will make me feel better and put me in a better place. Even if, because sometimes I do it, it's not because everything is going wrong, but it's because it's just like, sometimes you just need it. So although I feel as if like you have the support system, you have a good friend, you have your sister, you have your wife or your husband, I do still think that you may need to venture out and find that person that you can call once in a blue, that's not your sister, not your husband, not your brother or anything like that, to help you mentally.
Okay, thanks for that, Dion. Yeah, it's something I appreciate that. That's something, you know, listening to you both, is something I never considered. So, you know, I'm learning, you know, and the reason I guess that's the reason I asked, you know, is that like an investment, you know, like investing in business? Because I'm very serious about making sure that I'm thinking the right way and that I'm healthy up there as well. So I do think that's super important as the more I'm listening to you guys, or ladies, I'm sorry. I don't know, I don't offend anybody. So I appreciate that. Dion.
There's some other things as well that can support your mental health, and that is exercise, sleep, and what you eat. And as the research continues in the field of mental health, these three things are becoming increasingly, they're finding that they're increasing how important they are. Sleep, exercise, and proper eating.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Yeah. And even in the field of entrepreneurs, sometimes I find that sleep is the first thing to go. we're putting that on the back burner in order for us to stay up later to
I'm
get that last
guilty.
report out. Yeah, get that last report out, or to answer that call, or to get ready for the next day. You're going to sleep at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're waking up at 6 a.m. doing the same thing. I mean, your body can only go on for so long without adequate sleep. I mean, we truly forget that we're doing ourselves a disservice. Our brain's not functioning to the best of its capabilities. Our bodies isn't functioning in the capability that it can, because of the fact that we're shortening. We're shortening on the time for our brains to regenerate whatever cells it needs to regenerate, or to regroup, or other things, all the good stuff that happens in sleep. So yes, thank you for that, Lisa. That is vital. And entrepreneurs continue to kind of like, okay, let me just go to sleep at 3 o'clock. Let me stay up and do this. And I'm guilty of it too. I'm staying up and I'm writing a report, or I'm doing whatever. And the next day I feel it. I really feel it in my body.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for that, Lisa. I think I'm super guilty. Since I do sleep, but sometimes I try to neglect. I try to pull sometimes a lot of overnighters, 3 days, whatever. This is going to be my last question before I let somebody else go, or if nobody else has a question after this, we'll wrap it up. This is a twist, so be ready for it.
Twisted.
Maybe it's not that big of a twist. All right. So right now, in Haiti, specifically Port-au-Prince, it's not the whole country. I always like to highlight that, because I think every time things happen in Port-au-Prince, people tend to make it the whole country in Haiti. Right now, the streets are hot in Port-au-Prince. It's the safety. Safety is not is something that is of concern right now for a lot of people, for a lot of travelers, for a lot of people living there. Right now, specifically right now, right? When it comes to mental health access, or when we're thinking about mental health in Haiti, and we're talking about a different country, different environment, different world, and this can be in any country. We could be talking about India or wherever. I'm wondering, what are naturally some things that entrepreneurs or people in Haiti, or in Port-au-Prince specifically, or even if they're in another country where there's an environment that is where there's constant disruption in terms of the social environment, right? How do you have any tips on how to navigate that, right? Because I'm thinking about it from the sense, I acknowledge that I am here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. We have our own situations and protests and things like that. But it's not, of course, I won't ever compare it to somebody who might be dealing with the disruption of their business, like 3 years in a row, right? And as far as the pandemic, there was a protest there are a couple of protests, of course, over the past couple of years in Haiti, and especially in the Port-au-Prince area. If I'm an entrepreneur, and let's say I'm running a business there, and I'm dealing with that kind of stress, and I don't have easy access to a therapist, what are some things that you might recommend? And again, I don't want to isolate Port-au-Prince, because this literally can be anywhere in the world. But if I'm in that environment, what would you recommend?
I'm going to start off by saying this is definitely difficult, right? I mean, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is kind of this pyramid that us therapists kind of follow, or kind of psychological professional follows, and that in order for a person to achieve self-actualization, where they know themselves, they're content with themselves, and achieving your highest potential, there needs to be some type of your basic needs need to be met. And these basic needs are food, shelter, and warmth, love, and safety. So when you get to the point, or if somebody's living in an environment where those basic needs are constantly threatened, i.e. safety, it definitely is a little bit more difficult to achieve your highest potential, or get to that self-actualization pinnacle on the pyramid. But in the same breath, so if you're in this situation where those basic needs are constantly being threatened, I have to definitely say, yes, it's going to be difficult for you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to act like it's nothing, because that's a really big thing. Those are your basic needs right at the bottom of the pyramid, or the base of the pyramid. Now, is it possible for you to achieve self-actualization or to achieve your true self? It is. And it's going to be a little bit harder than it is for me and Ronald, I'm sitting in Miami, Florida, and like Ronald said, he's sitting in Atlanta, Georgia. But going back to some of the things that Dr. Edwin mentioned earlier, even Lisa mentioning Dion, going back to basic things like eating right. I know it sounds basic, but even going back to these basic things, eating right, exercising, getting adequate enough sleep, having your social network, and Ronald mentioned that, having that social group. If you're not getting access to a mental health therapist or a psychiatrist or some type of psychological professional, have a social group or have a support group that is strong. And if you don't have one, find one. Start developing a group, whether it's online or within your peers of entrepreneurs, people that you can really have heart-to-heart conversation like, man, the political climate right here in Puerto Rico is really difficult for me, and it's weighing on me in this way. Here's the stuff that are coming up for me because of all the stuff that are happening in our country right now. These are the ways that it's making me really sad. These are the ways that it's making me want to work harder. Having those really authentic conversations with the people in your support group, whether it's those close confidants like your cousins, your sisters, your mom, or your entrepreneurial group. Journaling. I find that people sometimes think journaling is a bit cheesy, but there's a lot of psychological benefits and research to suggest that journaling actually works. Sitting down and writing down those thoughts and feelings that you're experiencing on a daily basis, not letting it consume you and just staying inside of your body, putting it out on paper, taking it out of you just for a second. I think those are the ways to start. If you don't have a therapist, if you don't have a psychologist that you're speaking to on a regular basis, or simply that's just not something that you have access to, getting a social support network, group of people that you can talk to on a regular basis, doing what Lisa mentioned, that's that exercise, sleeping, eating healthy. I mean, there are so many benefits, just those 3 things alone, changing those eating habits, exercising, and sleeping. Those 3 alone, you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah.
The last thing is
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying the last thing I had was journaling. Go ahead, Ronald.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm thinking about some people that I know, and I talk to them, people in Haiti, and I like to hear sometimes how they deal with certain things and certain situations and certain scenarios, and a lot of those things do come to mind as far as how people deal with certain things, right? Even when you're talking about a different environment. So there is one aspect of the mentality or the mental, or what you're kind of telling yourself too, right? There is the aspect that I can literally be here in Atlanta, Georgia too. And this might be going a little deeper than we should be going, and maybe off topic, but there's people here in the United States, let's say in the first world country, who literally thinks this is the worst country in the world, right? So I think it goes back to what you're saying in terms of what you're telling yourself too, right? Like, I'm in Atlanta, and I'm like, Atlanta's the worst city. I can't stand this place. The cops are corrupt. There's just not enough, I don't know, diversity, blah, blah, blah. There's no jobs here. And there's somebody sitting next to them like, this is a great place. I don't know what you're talking about. So I think some of it is, listening to what you're talking about too, and how you're saying it also reminds me what you had on your PowerPoint in the sense of it's also what you're telling yourself based on that situation too, from my understanding. Because even with people in Haiti sometimes, I've also found that the world might be telling them one thing and they might be buying into that. And so literally they'll wake up in the morning and literally that's what they're thinking, right? I can go down to I'm in Miami. People are like, oh, I can't do Miami. Miami just, this and that. Miami's you know, everybody's a show off, or it's too expensive down there, and this and that. So if you, to a degree, if you kind of buy a lot of these things, not saying that some of these things don't exist or these external factors don't exist to a degree, but if you start telling yourself that certain things and repeating certain things to yourself, it can literally become a very stressful thing, because now you start creating this reality where you step outside the door, and I forget what you call that law, that principle. It's that law where, you know, when you recognize certain things, you see it over and over again. You know how you buy a car, you buy a Lexus, and the next thing you know, you start seeing that same car everywhere.
Yeah.
But if I literally think I'm in a hellhole and I think this is the worst place in the world, everything that I do as soon as I walk out the room or when I wake up in the morning, I'm just going to notice those things over and over again. I'm going to keep finding different reasons why, you know, Atlanta is the worst place in the world, why India is the craziest place to be, why you can't build a business here, you know, or why, you know, I'm in Port-au-Prince and things can't get done. So I think that, again, I'm not trying to ignore external factors at all, of course. But I do think, you know, that kind of points back from what I'm getting as far as what you're telling yourself and how you're letting some of these things affect you, you know. So it probably is important to start talking to people to kind of get some of these things off your chest, maybe hearing other perspectives, looking at things a little differently. So when the external world is happening outside of you, you're kind of mentally taking care of yourself, so you could think a little, you know, a bit more level-headed, and you know, do the best that you can based on the environment that you're in. I don't know, does that make sense? Am I being rational?
No.
Because I'm trying not to make sure I'm negating external factors.
No,
but I'm also,
you're so right. And when we talk about going back to cognitive behavioral therapy again, so some of the things that a lot of the stuff that I remind my clients is not necessarily the situation that brings us the most distress, so that brings the pain. It's our perception or how we think about the situation that creates the sadness, that creates depression, that creates the anxiety. So that situation and those external factors will exist for everybody, but everybody will have different emotional responses to that situation. It's because of the thoughts that you're telling yourself in that situation. So you're completely right. And then if we learn to just kind of shift our thinking or shift our perspective just a little bit, how we perceive the situation will have a different outcome or different impact on our emotional response. So that's a huge thing. Cognitive behavioral therapy tells us that all the time. It's not the situation, it's not the things that are happening in our external environment, but how we're perceiving the situation and the thoughts that we're internalizing and that's perpetuating into the world. So that is a very, very good one.
that reminds me of this book. I got to promote this because it actually reminds me of this book. For the president of AFPEC wrote this. He's probably not watching, but his book is called Changer Tête ou Changer Pays.
Nice. I love it. Yes.
So shout out to Henry. I'm promoting your book for free, man. But he is the president.
I gotta go read that book.
Yeah. So
I love it. Yeah. Change your mentality, change your thoughts, and you change your country. That is spot on. That is spot on.
Yeah, that reminded me of that. Okay, so that's it for me because I'm not gonna keep talking. I have a, you know, we're gonna talk off camera for this stuff. Dion, I thought I saw your hand raised. I don't know if you had another question or if that was a mistake. Does anybody have any other questions, comments, concerns before you know, we have the after party? Oh, okay. We got some comments in the on Facebook. I'm just gonna read some of them. Nelson, oh, cool, Nelson. Yay, Nelson. What's up, Nelson? All right. So Nelson said, "Great presentation. Sometimes you just need a professional to get the root of some of the things." I think he was making comments on some of the what Dion was talking about. I think I need it because I'm always being optimistic and not addressing the root of my problem, which causes me to get deeper in problems.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Nelson. So Nelson said that. So thank you, Nelson, for bringing that up. I am acknowledging that. And I wish I would have saw that earlier. I think that was like a few minutes ago. So any other questions that we want to bring up? Comments, concerns? All right.
No, Ron, I just want to say, like, a lot of the things that Michelle and yourself were talking about a couple of minutes ago were super like on point, like super because of the situation that's happening in Haiti. But I want to even point that out, that you find yourself in a situation where even the support system that you built for yourself can become a little bit I don't, because let's say, for example, that my best friends, right, are in the US. They are people who migrated. And let's say I'm the only person still in Haiti. The conversation, the vibe changes. Like that person that you used to talk about the latest hip hop albums, like it's a whole different thing. It's like now the whole conversation shifts around, man, are you taking care of yourself? Are you staying safe? Are you making sure that, so it's like you get to a point where the people whom you're supposed to be able to count on, to, like pull you through that situation is the people that you're avoiding because the whole situation shifts. So I'm really glad you touched on this, and it's real. Like it's really real, and it's getting harder and harder. The other thing I'd like to say is really I really want to thank you guys again. And I did know that Jordash was your cousin. I don't be reading all these detective comics for nothing. So really, thank you guys for the whole presentation. And I think this should just be a part one, to be honest.
Ronald, you're muted.
I said, Edwin, I wanted to thank you for that, man. I did want to ask you that. I know we talk on a frequent basis too. Going back to that, you having those group of friends who are supposed to kind of keep that healthy space for you. I'm wondering, is that something, maybe Josh, you can comment on this too. Would it be helpful if you maybe mentioned it to them? Because I'll make sure that when we talk, I don't ask you how you're doing if this is supposed to be safe space for you. But is that something that you feel comfortable like letting people know? Does it make you feel weird, or does it kind of contradict the situation or the relationship?
Oh yeah, I totally know. I think one of the most important part with me is that I'm clear, right? I tell you what I gotta tell you. I'm direct. People know. They know, but to be honest, it's kind of like I don't think my situation is that special. I think it's kind of like always a tug of war. Everybody who's in the U.S. believes the U.S. is the best place to be, and they believe everybody who stays in Haiti are like stupid, right? So, and I feel that I see that like on a regular basis. Like it's not a rare occurrence, and I believe it even happened in that conversation, right? So it's just to say that a lot of the perception is that, it's so much better on the other side. So a lot of these conversations center around, man, you have so much potential. Man, you could be the next Elon Musk. Man, you could be, so it gets to that position where you have to be firm. You have to know who you are. And that's why I always say step one is know yourself. You have to know who you are and understand what makes you tick. Like what are you here? What's your purpose? What do you want to do? And then that way, because you already have that foundation, then you can go out there in the world. You can have friends even on Mars if you want. But if you don't know who you are, you're gonna be easily swayed away. People are gonna convince you that your whole path wasn't working before, and that's why I really wanted to put emphasis on the personality type, because entrepreneurs have personality traits that automatically puts them on a weakness that they're automatically more vulnerable to certain things. For example, like the whole entrepreneur personality doesn't like to stay focused on one thing at the same time. They have to keep like moving all the time, and that helps, of course, in certain situations. But if you're gonna plan to have a big business, to grow, to scale, and etc., then that plays against you, right? So it's really important to understand who you are at first, and then you find a way to compensate that. And again, when I said born entrepreneur, that's why I said quote unquote. I don't believe in that either, but people have, like, these personality traits do exist, right? And if the more you know about it, the more you know about your weaknesses, the more you know about your strengths, the more you can capitalize on these latter, and the more you can compensate for this former. So yeah, I do let people know that, hey, I'm never gonna leave Haiti. Don't even bother. Yeah, I'll tell them that, and it's got me in a lot of trouble with a lot of people, but it is what it is.
Well, it gets me excited. So, man, keep it going. I hope I'm one of those people that keep. I like people who like to challenge, who steps up to the plate and challenge. We need more people like you, and that's really what Bell is about. So, yeah, I'm in your corner with that, man.
I think Dion has a question.
Dion has a question. Sorry, I'm on kind of managing.
Hi guys, sorry I keep talking. It's not so much of a question. I don't want to veer away from entrepreneurship, but it's just like Haiti is a soft spot for me because I was born in, I was raised there. I was raised there, although I've been here for 20 years. But it's just like, I feel as if and I talk about Haiti a lot with my family, with my friends and everything, and with everything that's going on. And it all comes down to education, right? And it's not only Haiti, even like in Africa, these people are so smart. The things they can do with their hands with no education, But the thing is, one thing that I can say that with America, where we're able to go to school and free of charge, right? And Haiti, unless you have money, you cannot get the correct education that you're supposed to get, right? So now these people who are doing these things is like, say like, I'm running for office in Haiti. And I say, hey, Ronald, example, right? And Ronald has no education. Ronald has no money. I'm going to pay you $100 American to go and cause this destruction. What do you think Ronald's going to do? Right? Ronald, that $100 American seemed a lot to Ronald, although it's nothing to me, and cause this destruction and starts killing and doing all this stuff. And I think when it comes, and even with mental health, we're talking about mental health with Haiti, it's very hard. And it was very hard for me to even get a mental health counselor like a couple of years back, because it's like, I can do it. I'm strong. I don't need this. This is for the white people. This is this is that. Because in our brain, being born there and seeing these things, seeing what our peoples overcome, our parents and all these things, we feel like we don't need these things. So it's just like, I think it's like, it will be very hard when it comes to Haiti and the people in Haiti to kind of bring this awareness, because at the end of the day, we're like, it's in their mind. Because I know in my mind, it used to be silly. Like, I don't need this, So it's like, it's very hard, and it's unfortunate where like all this thing that's going on right now, when we can do so much, we can be so much, like I said, with no education at all. These people, they're building things with their hands, they're doing so much, and that lets you know how far, if you have an education, how far you can go. You understand what I'm saying? Even in a high school education, and some of them over there, and I was talking to my uncle who's in Haiti, and I don't know if a lot of you guys know, a lot of people in Haiti are entrepreneurs, right? They have their own business, whether it's selling plantains, whether it's selling books, whether it's selling chicken, whether it's selling oranges, but they have to find a way to live. And they built their own businesses. It might not be as big as in America, right? But they have that business where they have to sell these things to be able to live, So I just think that it's a very touchy subject for me, because being from there, born from there, raised from there, where like I can't even go there with my family because of how it is over there. Or not, you know what? I'm not going to say Haiti, Port-au-Prince. But to get to wherever you want to get to, you have to go through Port-au-Prince to go to Jérémie or Okap or these different places. I just wanted to make that statement.
And thank you for that, Dion. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your reality and your thoughts with us. I think that's important too, right? But that's why we're doing this too, right? That's why the Bell Initiative exists. That's why we're doing these Bell sessions, these Bell Aspect sessions, and that's just to spread the awareness. So it's difficult, and I like to make the difference between difficult and impossible, right? These are still two different things. So you mentioning that on Facebook Live, on this Zoom, is going to spread to somebody else who needs to hear that, right? You know, that's why we have Aspect here, parce qu'il y a partagé ça, toute information ça avec mon en Haiti. Everybody in Haiti is going to get a chance to hear this. And as long as we keep doing this over and over again, this is going to help. This is our way of actually contributing to that. And so, and continue to do your work and help Haiti in your way, in the way you know best. So, you know, I acknowledge that. I want to make sure that, you know, we hear you. And I want to make sure that passion that you have in wanting to see Haiti as a developed nation, that it stays there and that fire stays burning there and that you do something with it. We at the Bell Initiative, of course, with the Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Daly, who's here, Edwin Magloire, AFPEC, we all have the same belief that Haiti is a developed nation in our lifetime. So regardless of what it looks like now, regardless of how difficult things might seem, it's not impossible, not at all. And that's why, you know, we have people like Edwin, who's here on the line, who says he's never leaving Haiti. We want to encourage that, right? Because these are the people who are going to be, I think Edwin's going to be, well, I'm not say that, right? But yeah, Edwin's going to be a great guy in Haiti. And we have to throw our support behind the people who are living there, who are working there, and that's our job as the diaspora. So I thank you for sharing. I thank you for still having your love for Haiti, and I pray that you can join us in the movement to support the entrepreneurs and the people who live there 24/7. Huh?
Support the entrepreneurs and their mental health. You want to keep having these open conversations about mental health awareness in the entrepreneur, in the lives of their family, and in their lives, in their personal lives. Just having these open conversations. Mental health is a real thing. It exists. It's not this fictitious thing. It's not a thing that only impacts the crazy, quote unquote, X, Y, and Z. It's a thing that impacts all of us in some way, shape, or form. And you don't just pray it off. You don't just sleep it off. It's an active, continuing work and working on your mental health with either a therapist or in everyday activities.
Awesome. So we're hitting the 4 o'clock mark, and so that's a good 2 hours that we've been going. It's a good topic. Thank you, Dion. Thank you for everybody who checked in. Edwin, thank you for all the Bell Fellows who came. Thank you for all the entrepreneurs and new people. People on Facebook, thank you. Dion, if you don't mind me asking, where are you at?
Well, not Miami. Sorry, I'm so used to Miami. Tamarack, Florida.
Tamarack, same thing, Membaga. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Membaga, Miami.
Same thing. So yeah, thank you for checking in. Jorash, I'm going to give you the last word. What do you want to leave us with on this Sunday, as far as mental health, as far as entrepreneurs, as far as Haiti lovers, as far as you, what do you want to leave us with?
I think in this conversation, I think Edwin said it earlier, and he was saying that there needs to be a part 2. I think there needs to be a continued conversation in terms of mental health and entrepreneurship, and even mental health in Haiti. I don't know to what extent mental health is spoken about in Haiti, and perhaps people who are living there and who are developing business there, perhaps we can have an open conversation on what needs to happen in mental health governance in Haiti, or mental health conversation in health. What are they seeing on the grounds, and what needs to happen in Haiti in terms of mental health care? But because mental health is a real thing that impacts everybody in the United States, Haiti, Germany, wherever you are in the world, you are impacted in mental health, by mental health in some way, shape, and form. And we need to have an open conversation about what it actually looks like and what we need to do to be developing healthy mental health practices. So again, I would love to be a person that, or be a part of an ongoing conversation regarding mental health care, because this is not something.
Careful, I'm going to invite you back again.
Invite me back. Like Edwin said, we need to have a 2.0. We need to really be having a conversation about it. This is important. And a lot of times too, I find even before I became a mental health professional, I mean, I didn't know what it was. And I think Dion alluded to it too, where people were like, this is not something we experience. With sadness, anxiety, that's not a thing. But it's actually a thing, right? Maybe if we don't have the words for it, maybe we don't know what it feels like inside our bodies, or maybe we don't even know what it looks like inside our communities. Just because we don't know what it is doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean that it's something that we're still not impacted by, just because we don't have a name for it and we don't know what it means or what it feels like inside our bodies. So let's burst through the stigma. Let's burst through the shame. Let's have open conversation, open dialogue, what it means to be sad, what it means to feel anxious, what it means to feel suicidal. Again, if you look at the research, so many entrepreneurs, high-level entrepreneurs, are committing suicide. And I think it goes beyond just, you know, personality type, or going beyond just living in the United States. I think it's something across borders. I mean, we as a collective, we as people, we are under so much stress. COVID, economic distress, you know, uprising, whatever you want to call it. There's so much stress that's going on in our human lives and in our human existence. Of course, we're going to feel sad about it. Of course, we're going to be stressed about it. Of course, we want to get ourselves out of it and have a way out. So let's have an open conversation about it once in a while and talk about ways for us to get through this together. Because collectively, that's how we get through it collectively, and being open about it and honest about it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We can reach out to you at
Oh yeah, this is my
Michelle.
screen. Yes. So yeah, you can contact me or send me an email, gmichellecounseling@gmail.com. Reach out to me. I don't know what I'll do if I wanted. Sometimes I think about developing a group, and Ronald gave me the idea of doing a group.
Create a group.
Yeah,
please.
we can have like mental health conversations, or and where I do mental health care groups. I haven't decided yet, but either ways, if you just want to reach out to me, please feel free to reach out to me at this email, and I do answer my emails promptly. So please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
All right. So we know you are based in Florida, and you most of your clients are in the U.S. Can people in Haiti reach out to you as well?
Yes, you can reach out to me. Now, I can't be your therapist because there are like jurisdictions, and I think what do you call it? I forget, that I would have to obtain in order to do counseling in another country. I don't think it's quite, I don't know if it's legal, but you can reach out to me, and we can have conversations. Maybe it won't be considered counseling. But yeah, I could reach out to you, and together maybe we find better options for you where you currently exist if you are in.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you all.
And everybody, make sure if you need or you know somebody that is in need of this kind of information, share this video with them. Of course, you can also have them reach out to Jorash Michel at gmichellecounseling@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on Facebook at Bell Initiative and Instagram at Bell Initiative, on LinkedIn as well, of course. And we're going to try to do a part 2. We got to do a part 2. We're going to definitely invite our good friends, Dr. Magloire, because I know he's a doctor, and you know, he kind of ties into some of that stuff. And then, of course, Dion, we're going to invite you back too, because I know this is something you're very passionate about as well, and you have some experience. So thank you all again. Follow us on social media. Make sure if you need some help, reach out to Jorash. She might be able to guide you at least. And definitely, and we'll see you back again at another Bell AFPEC session or Bell session. All right. So good day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for having me. You all have a great rest of your afternoon.
Okay, I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Dion. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Bye.